Hello everyone, I'm James Croft, one of the leaders of the Ethical Society of St. Louis, a large humanist congregation in St. Louis, Missouri, and today is Ask an Atheist Day. So I thought it might be fun for one of our Humanism at Home videos to solicit questions on Facebook and Twitter, and then try and answer as many of those questions as I can. Now, to spice this video up, I'm going to give myself a couple of rules. First, I'm doing this all in one take. This is my first and instinctive response to all the questions that people asked. I'm not editing them. I'm not thinking too deeply about them. I'm just going to read the question and then give you my answer. Second, I've made myself, even though it's the middle of the day, come on, we're in quarantine, so we have to relax these social rules, a nice cocktail, my very favourite rum and coke, and I will be taking a swig of this cocktail after every question, and we'll see how that affects my answers towards the end. And thirdly, I'm going to give myself exactly a minute to try and answer each of these questions, because there's quite a number of questions, more than 15 of them, and I want to make sure I get through all of them and not make this video ridiculously long. So I'll give myself 1 minute to answer each of your questions, and then if they require a longer video in the future, I'll make a longer video for particular ones. Now, we did get a lot of questions. I'm not going to answer every single question that you all submitted, but I have split the questions we received into 4 sections. So first, we've got general atheism, questions about atheism, what it means, and how I'm an atheist and things like that. Questions about atheism and religion. Questions about atheism and humanism. And finally, questions about the atheist movement, which are more sort of inside baseball-y questions, because I've been involved in the atheist movement for a long time, so people think I have a view about that, but I've put those to the end in case you're not particularly interested in those. So I'm going to set up my timer, I'm going to get ready to answer these questions, and I hope you enjoy this Humanism at Home video for Ask an Atheist Day. Okay, so let's go. Our first section on general atheism, and the first question is from Bill. What other word or phrase can you use to describe yourself other than the negative word atheist? I do believe. I just believe that God is a human construct, so this is what I believe. Well, Bill, atheist doesn't mean you don't believe anything. It just means you don't believe in God. And I don't view it as a negative word, except in the technical sense that it means an absence of belief. I view it very positively because I think that there's no evidence that God exists. There are no good reasons to believe in God. So I view atheism as a positive word to describe a person's lack of belief in God. I do understand that the word atheist has a negative connotation in US culture, but I don't think that makes it a negative word. I just think that that's because of stigma that's been perpetuated against atheists over time. I do call myself a humanist in addition to an atheist, and that word humanist expresses my positive values, but I don't think atheist is a negative word, and no one should be ashamed to use it. Whew! Came in just at the timer counting down there. So now we have our second question from Timothy. I have a friend who is an atheist and gay. For him, coming out as an atheist was harder in some respects because for some strong believers, atheism is less reconcilable than homosexuality. Did you have to come out as an atheist to anyone? And if so, which coming out was harder for you? Can you compare the two, or were they completely different experiences? Honestly, for me, Timothy, coming out as gay was much harder and very different to coming out as an atheist. I first told my parents I thought I might be gay when I was 17 years old, and it took me until I was 27, so a whole decade later, to finally accept myself and come out of the closet as gay. But that doesn't mean that other people don't have very difficult experiences of coming out of the closet, as it were, as an atheist. I've heard from many people around the country who say the same thing as your friend, that it was even harder for them to come out as an atheist and come out as gay. There is significant social stigma against atheists, and I think that we have to take that seriously, even though for me it was much harder to come out as gay as an atheist because my family, none of them believe in God. Okay, what about Lou's question? Are there elements of deconversion that you feel are missed in the typical "I was a believer until I got to college, learned science, or read the Bible closely" narrative that seems to be fairly common? Should we be paying more attention to the emotional or, for lack of a better word, spiritual reasons people leave faiths? Well, Lou, I do think we should be paying more attention to the wide variety of reasons people leave their religious traditions behind. Because that narrative you mentioned, I left home and went to college and rethought my beliefs, is not true for many, many atheists. Many of us, like me, grew up in non-religious households and were atheists from the start. We never had a moment of conversion or rapid or very big change in our beliefs. But also people who did have major changes in our beliefs, sometimes it's not because they learnt more about religion. Sometimes, as you suggest in your question, it's because a loved one died and they couldn't reconcile that with having a loving God, or something terrible happened in their life. There can be many, many reasons why people give up religion and become an atheist, and we should be open to all those different narratives. Okay, that's my minute. Now, I realize I've been failing to drink my drink, so I have to give 3 swigs. I've answered 3 questions. It's so good. I learned how to make this from a restaurant right next to our condo, and they have a couple of little tricks, including adding a little simple syrup to the mix. It's sublime, people. I love it. And I love drinking it at what is now 12:51 p.m. in the afternoon Central Time. This is special just for this video. I don't normally do this. But if you do, no judgment. Okay, it's time for Bren's question. What is a belief you hold that might be considered unpopular or uncommon to other atheists? Well, Bren, you open a possibility for me to say something very important, which is that atheists have a wide variety of different beliefs on many different topics. And indeed, there's nothing inherent about atheism that means we have to agree on anything else. Atheism is not a belief system. It simply means that people don't believe in God. And people can not believe in God and have one politics, for instance, and not believe in God and have a totally different politics, for instance. Being an atheist doesn't even mean that all atheists don't believe in the supernatural. I know plenty of atheists who believe in ghosts and psychic phenomena, for instance. So atheists can believe many different things, and one thing I believe, which is very unpopular in some atheist circles, is about the importance of congregations. I think religious institutions offer many good things to people. It's important to keep them, but build secular alternatives. Some atheists hate that. Whew, I almost ran out of time with that one. Thank you, Bren, for your question. Okay, Aaron asks, have you ever read Terry Eagleton's critique of the New Atheists, who he calls Ditchkins, in his book Reason, Faith and Revolution? And if so, what do you think? I haven't actually read that book, so you might think I should have skipped this question or give a very short answer, but I have read some of Terry Eagleton's articles critiquing the New Atheists, and I've heard him on podcasts and debates, etc., where he's done the same when he's given a talk. So I'm going to say a little bit about those critiques. Firstly, I want to say I share many of them. I think many of the arguments made in the famous New Atheist books, like those by Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Chris Hitchens and Dan Dennett, are less so Dan Dennett, honestly. Let's just say Hitchens, Dawkins, and Harris are weak arguments against the existence of God, weak arguments in favor of atheism, and particularly weak when they expand beyond atheism to making social generalizations and kind of setting out how the world should be. So I agree, but I think Eagleton is very unfair to new atheists in other areas and that they raise important questions. Whew, I basically ran out of time on that one, so sorry, Aaron. Maybe I'll do another video for you a little bit later. Now, Leonard asked a question that I'm not sure is actually a question that he wanted answered on this show, but I'm going to try and answer it anyway. And that question is, why does anyone think being an atheist will allow a particular insight on any subject? There are lots of wildly varied ways to come to doubt the existence of God. Well, I agree with you, Leonard. Firstly, there are lots of ways to come to doubt the existence of a God. There isn't just one route to atheism, and there are unreasonable ways to be an atheist. I obviously think atheism is true. I don't believe that there is a God, and I think that it's a reasonably defensible position to disbelieve in God. But I do believe there are unreasonable reasons to disbelieve in God, and so I don't think that simply being an atheist necessarily gives anyone insight into anything. And in fact, there are plenty of atheists out there who I would not want to take their advice on any topic whatsoever. And conversely, there are plenty of religious people out there who I would listen to for their wisdom and insight, even though we have a disagreement over belief in God. So basically, Leonard, I agree with you. Right, that's one section of the Ask an Atheist Day questions down. We're going to move to atheism and religion now, but first I'm going to take a big swig of my cocktail. Oh, this is so delicious. I wish we had that technology that they have in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where you can transmit food through the television screen, because I would have you taste my cocktail through the screen, because it's just exquisite. The Mexican Coke with the real cane sugar is an important component of my favorite cocktail. Okay. This section is atheism and religion, and we're starting with a question from Marvin. Do you think that there is some confusion in comparing atheism to religion, whether it is God-based or humanist? Yes, is the short answer to this question. Atheism is not a religion, and religious apologists who try and draw parallels between atheism and religion very often distort the nature of both atheism and religion in order to do so. In my mind, religion is a complex sociological structure that involves many different things, including beliefs about God, which is what atheism is about, but also lots of other things that you have to have a religion, including ways of gathering together for communal activity, rites and rituals, a set of religious values, etc., etc. Religions tend to have institutional structures, and they tend to have hierarchies. They have so many other elements that pure atheism as an idea does not. So I do not think it is appropriate to compare atheism to a religion or religion in general. Humanism is another question. Okay, now we've got a question from Elliot. We know that religion, and particularly for the Western world, Christianity, has inspired an enormous amount of great artistic expression. Can atheism offer any similar claims of artistic expression? The short answer to that question is I think it can, though not to the same extent. Now you have to remember that one of the reasons why religions like Christianity have inspired a whole lot of artistic expression, which is doubtless true. I am a lover of the arts. I love choral music. Tons of choral music is religious, and so I can't deny that religion has inspired lots of artistic creativity, is that those religions were effectively fused with the state. They were whole ways of organizing society, and if people wanted to be artists and have patrons, they had to create religious art, and they certainly couldn't create irreligious art. So there has been a sort of social bias against creating explicitly atheistic artworks. That said, there are wonderful forms of art which are atheistic or express atheism. I'm thinking of things like the works of Camus or Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy. I wish I could give you more examples, but our minute is up. I will do a whole episode of Humanism at Home about humanism and atheism and art, because I think that's a wonderful topic that's not explored enough. Okay, Rich's question. The question that I want to know is there something inherent about the human mind and psyche that no matter how advanced we become, religion will always be there in some form for a large percentage of the population? Why do some individuals seem to gravitate easily toward atheism and others really can't get there? The answer to that question, honestly, Rich, is I don't know. I don't know if there's something inherent about the human mind that makes belief in God or religion in general something that seems to perpetuate across time, across cultures, and across the world, but that is definitely true. I think that there may be some features of the human mind, and Dan Dennett has written intelligently about this, which encourage people to assume that natural phenomena are in fact the result of intentional agency. And that is what gives rise to many beliefs in God, particularly sort of animistic ideas as spirits within the wind or in rocks or trees and things like that. So I think that that might be a fundamental feature. I don't know if there are really individual differences between how attuned people are to the possibility of atheism or not, though. I'd have to see more research to give you a definitive answer on that. Okay, Andrew has a question next. I love how Andrew has phrased his question. It is, what does an atheist think of Buddhism? Well, I can tell you what this atheist thinks of Buddhism, although I must stress I'm not a Buddhist practitioner and I'm not an expert on Buddhism. But my understanding is that at least some strands of Buddhism are non-theistic. And increasingly there are forms of what you might call secular Buddhism out there, which incorporate Buddhist practices and insights into consciousness into a secular worldview. And I think we can actually do that with all religions. I think we can separate religious practices from the beliefs which may have given rise to them and see whether those practices are beneficial to humankind, and if they are, continue to do them within a secular framework. And secular Buddhism is one movement which attempts to do that with Buddhism. Now, there are problems with that approach, like you don't want to essentially take another culture's religion and strip it of its religious meaning, and there's all sorts of problematic elements to that. But I think it's an interesting approach. Okay, Andrew, that was the answer to your question. Now, Matthew has a question. Well, I'm halfway through this. I feel really very good. Matthew asks, what if God is the universe and everything in it? Well, Matthew, you're basically asking the question of pantheism. What if God is essentially equivalent to the whole universe? And my answer to that is I'm still an atheist in that context, simply because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to simply redefine the universe by using the word God. That is not how most believers in God think about that term. If you read both sophisticated apologists and everyday believers in what they say about God, it is not simply equivalent to the whole universe. And so I think it's confusing to attempt that redefinition. And secondly, if there is an element of panpsychism, or the idea that the whole universe is a single mind with a consciousness, which is usually a central component of how people understand God, I think there is no evidence to support that idea. No evidence to support the idea that the universe as a whole is conscious. Well, I literally ran out of time on that one. It was the first one where I went like half a second over, but I'm really passionate about this attempt to redefine God with different words to kind of get around the problems of proving that a traditional God exists. So I don't go with that. It's not my thing. I needed 2 swigs for that one. That one got me worked up. Okay, Sean has... I know Sean. This is a typically long question from Sean. I love you, Sean. Thank you for the question. Traditional religions tend to project an assumption that they are superior sources of sacred wisdom as opposed to academic or secular wisdom. And society tends to acknowledge that those belief systems are somehow set apart and more special than others. Usually the largest religions, Hindu, Buddhist, the three Abrahamic faiths, etc. How do we put those schools of thought, e.g. Stoicism, Transcendentalism, Existentialism, Postmodernism, etc., on an equal playing field with religious thought at large? And would that be an effective way to reduce belief in the supernatural? Well, I've just lost my countdown timer, but I'm going to keep going. Okay, Sean asks a very difficult question. It is true that many traditional religions claim to a level of knowledge above that of the secular world. And I don't believe that religious knowledge has that. I think that everything is on the same level. I think all these claims do exist on the sort of same epistemic ground, and that religions trying to elevate themselves above it is an illegitimate thing to do. So I think that we, instead of elevating secular schools of thought to the level of religious ones, we need to bring the religious ones down to the level of the secular and say that your religious theories are the same, epistemically speaking, as a scientific theory or a sociological theory, whatever, and not allow them to claim some sort of elevated idea of their own selves. That's a very, very difficult answer to a very long question. Another video that has to be made in the future. Okay, next question from a celebrity within the atheist world, Debbie Goddard. Hey Debbie, you're fantastic. You're a wonderful human being. I can really feel the effects of this cocktail. What? Deb asks, what effects do you think the current pandemic will have on religious belief and participation in the US over the next few years? And it's a two-parter. What effects on the organized, secular, atheist and humanist communities? Okay, so first, what effects is this going to have on religions? I'm seeing from my own congregation a hugely increased desire to participate in communal activities. Our online programs are hopping with folks. And I think that more and more people will want to get together in physical spaces to engage in community after this. I think at least for a while, people will realize how important communities are, and we'll see an uptick in religious engagement. I also think we will see millennial and other apocalyptic cults develop that will be, I don't mean millennials as in young people like me, I mean millennialism, like apocalyptic style cults that see this as the end of the world. And I think we'll see really weird forms of things that we don't like. The secular atheist humanist community will be affected less, I think, because it's less communally organized. But I think we may see some organizations go under because they can't sustain their funding. I hope that's not true, but I think it might be very challenging for some of these organizations to exist. Okay, we're now on to the third section of our Ask an Atheist Day questions. And I'm now on to the last quarter of my drink, so I have to slow down a bit. But luckily, there are less questions in this section. So, this is a section on atheism and humanism, just two questions. Louise asks, hey Louise, could you please explore the relationship between atheism and humanism? So in 1 minute, humanism is a positive set of values, an interconnected positive set of values that helps orient us towards life. So it's a commitment to human dignity, a commitment to the equality of persons, it's a commitment to rationalism. Atheism is just disbelief in God. So it really isn't a positive value set in any way. It's not a statement of any positive values whatsoever. You can be irrational, you can be a bigot, you can be into all sorts of authoritarian regimes and be an atheist. It doesn't give you a value set whatsoever. So that's what the difference is between those two things. However, atheism is often an important component of humanism for two reasons. Firstly, because a commitment to rationalism, in my mind, leads to atheism. If you rationally assess the world, you can't believe in God. That's my belief. But also because atheism puts humans at the center of the frame as the focus of concern, and so does humanism. That was a really short answer to a really important question, but hopefully it will give you something, Louise. Okay, Aaron asks, I did Aaron's wedding. It's lovely to get a question from Aaron. was a beautiful, beautiful wedding. Though I say so myself. Lovely location, great people. It's nice to get a question from you, Aaron. So Aaron asks, how does/might an atheist understand social progress? I think the main difference between an atheist and someone who believes in a traditional God in the area of social progress is that atheists don't believe the universe has a preordained trajectory. We don't believe in a teleological understanding of human destiny. And what I mean by that is many religious traditions kind of teach that good wins in the end, that there is a trajectory to the universe that it has to go on because God wants it to go that way. Human beings aren't entirely in control. Things will turn out all right or not, depending on God's will. And humanists and atheists tend to reject that view and say that no, things aren't determined like that. There isn't a moral teleology to the universe. And so social progress is contingent on human action in an atheist worldview. That's at least what I believe. Okay, last section is on the atheist movement itself. A couple of inside baseball questions about the atheist movement. Now, unless you know anything about the atheist movement, this might not have any meaning to you at all. But just so you know, there is a movement of organizations and groups that makes an organized atheist movement, particularly in the United States, because the power of religion, particularly conservative religion, is so great in America that there has to be organizations and movements to promote atheists' full participation in public life because of the stigma against us and because of the overwhelming attempts by religions to take over every aspect of common life. So, 2 questions. First, a question from Donna. How do you feel about the politics of the atheist movement overall, especially in the US and the English-speaking world? Well, let me set my timer. So, Donna, I don't feel great about the politics of the atheist movement as a whole, although I think it's getting better. For too long, the atheist movement was wedded to an anti-religious identity that felt that the most important thing was to combat religion in public life instead of promoting a broader set of humanistic values. And so that led to things like an overemphasis on the potential impacts of Islam on public life and even Islamophobic expressions, or sort of clash of civilization narratives about Islam versus the West and stuff like that. And I hate that stuff. I think it's nonsense. I think it's damaging. I think it's terrible towards Muslims. But I have noticed a movement within the atheist movement as a whole towards a more fuller vision of social justice and care and concern for fellow human beings. And I am in favor of that, so I feel hopeful. Okay, and finally, I'm almost at the end of my drink. Okay, so Lance asks the last question. Lance says, I'm feeling disenchanted with atheism as an identity, and I'm beginning to see it more as a facet of an identity, as a skeptic, someone who believes that epistemology, that's how we form beliefs, how we determine what's true or false, is important. How much emphasis do you think the disbelief about the God question in particular deserves in terms of community identity, and why? I think the answer to this question depends very much on where you are, both geographically and in your own life journey. For some people, particularly people coming out of religious traditions, atheism is a very big part of their identity, and I understand that. They're rejecting a potentially harmful religious past. They want to assert that they don't believe in it, and so atheism becomes the way to assert that. It's particularly true in the United States, where atheists are stigmatized to a great degree, and so asserting that identity can be a very powerful way to overcome one's religious past and to push back against that stigma. However, I think the most healthy thing is to integrate one's atheism into a fuller conception of one's own identity, including a positive commitment to pro-social values. i.e. humanism. So I want to thank everyone, get to finish my cocktail now, thank everyone for asking all those excellent questions. I hope my answers have titillated your intellect. You feel interested to learn more, that you're going to tune in to more Humanism at Home videos in the future. And if you want to do that, you can subscribe to the Ethical Society of St. Louis's YouTube channel. And I'm now going to do my best impression of one of the gaming streamers that stream games on YouTube, and you can mash that like and subscribe button. Go on, just go ahead and mash it. And then you can subscribe to our channel and see all the Humanism at Home videos that we're going to create in the future. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time at Humanism at Home. Okay, peeps, just after I finished recording the last question for this video, I checked back on my Facebook and saw that there was one more question added by Donna that I thought it would be important to answer, and not just in 1 minute, because it really goes to the heart of a lot of the antagonism that sometimes exists between atheists and believers in God. And Donna's question is this: just because God does not exist for you, are you willing to entertain the idea that other rational people might sometimes interpret the world in a way that is expressed for them by the word God? I think that's a very interesting question, Donna, and I think you've put it in a sympathetic way. I will say for my own part that many of the people whose work I respect the most, clergy who I look up to, who I think are models for the sort of work that I want to do with the Ethical Society of St. Louis, are, of course, believers in God. And I respect them. I respect them as individuals, and I respect their intellect. And if they see the world in a way that is more rationally intelligible, including a concept of God, then I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to convince them otherwise. In fact, I'm not going to spend any time trying to convince them otherwise, because these are people who are doing great work in their community and who are serving people through their faith. And anyone who is doing that is my ally. As a humanist, I will work alongside anyone of whatever religion who does good for people. And honestly, the more I work with clergy from different religious traditions, the more that is my belief. At the same time, I don't see a disagreement over the existence of God just in terms of a disagreement over terminology to use to explain our experience. I think the claim that God exists is a claim about reality. And it's a claim that changes our relationship to reality so profoundly that we should be able to offer good evidence and reasons to believe it. And I don't think that evidence or those reasons are there. So when I say I am an atheist, I mean something a little stronger than God does not exist for me, but it might exist for you. What I mean is that using my best intellect, examining the evidence and arguments, I don't think it is ultimately reasonable to believe in God. That doesn't mean that I think the people who do believe in God are unreasonable people, because I think we all hold beliefs that are not reasonable. But it does mean that I don't think sufficient arguments can be presented to justify belief in an actually existing God. But I think I can hold that view while also working alongside religious people with respect. And I think that's very, very important to hold on to. And I'd ask people to remember that that is actually exactly what most religious people do when they work with atheists. Most of my religious clergy colleagues actually think God does exist. They believe that you can rationally come to that view, and they believe that I should believe that too. It's not just me who believes my beliefs are rationally justified, it's also most believers. And so I don't buy the idea that it's just another way of looking at the world and it's equally good. I'm not a relativist in that sense. but I do believe profoundly that people of all religions and none can come together despite our disagreement over the existence of God and work to make a better world for the people who live in it.